Hey, welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Never Board of Trade podcast. As always, I'm Jaipaul.
I'm Vijay.
And this is our bi-weekly conversation around all things happening in the world and what they mean for Brampton.
That's right, yeah.
So it's been an interesting couple of weeks here in our fair city. We're getting a little bit closer, creeping toward municipal elections. There's been some of our local provincial representatives have been called out for not the best of reasons. And once again, our business community is facing the threat of nonsensical across the board tariffs. So lots of stuff for us to talk about today. But perhaps let's start with where I began, and that's the municipal election. Mm-hmm. And what it is the Board of Trade is going to be doing. We started some engagement with our members last week at our annual town hall around some of the issues that they feel are important for the Board of Trade to be championing as part of our election engagement. And I thought perhaps you could talk a little bit about what it is that we did, what the town hall was about, and what we did to what we're planning on doing rather with the information and the questions that were raised to us.
Yeah. So I mean, at the town hall, it was interesting because for the last several months we've been developing an election strategy. We've been assembling an elections task force, which is a subset of our PGR volunteers. We've established relationships with media organizations. So we have a loose sense of what we'll be doing. My goal going to the town hall was to just survey many of our members and community members to understand what's important to them and what do they want to see more from us. So those were my two questions. What issues are most important to you in this election? And what do you want to see more from the Brampton Board of Trade?
And I want you to talk about those, but before you do, you did a great preamble before you put those questions to those who are assembled there about why the Board of Trade cares about a municipal election and why it's important that we have this discussion. I think it's worth our listeners hearing that as well, because I think it's really insightful, and I saw that it raised eyebrows in the room when you shared why do we care about this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If there's anything that I missed that you think is worth mentioning, please jump in. But from what I recall me saying, it was along the lines of
you went to like a fugue state.
Yeah, exactly.
I just woke up 5 minutes later,
disembodied. So pretty much what I presented is this idea that voter turnout in 2022, which was the last municipal election, was 24.56%, just extremely low. Less than a quarter of those who were eligible to vote decided gave the mandate of 4 years to the mayor and to council. And that this is not a comment on the legitimacy of their mandate or anything like that, but it should be noted that a vanishingly low number of residents are deciding the next 4 years. Mm-hmm. And so that to me is the motivation for the work that we're doing at the Board of Trade now, which is to plug people into the conversation in a way that maybe they feel isn't systematically awarded to them. And I think municipal elections are a great opportunity for candidates to define the narrative and define a lot of the issues. And that's what we've seen, I think, at least for as long as I've been in Brampton. That's sort of been the case. I think the opportunity we have in this election is to define the issues for candidates.
That's right.
And to have members of the community raise issues that are top of mind for them and to pose direct questions to those who are vying to represent us. And so I think local democracy is the most important layer. It is the level of government that affects our daily lives in this really tactile way. Mm-hmm. And it's also the level of government that has the lowest voter turnout, the lowest level of engagement, even between elections. So elections themselves are great referendums on leadership and all of that, but it's really the time between elections that I think we see the machinery of democracy kind of move and innovate and adapt. And a lot of that work, I think, involves us motivating and encouraging folks to delegate, or if they don't wish to delegate, if we're delegating, making sure that we consult with the community and all of those things. So I think I'm really seeing this municipal election. Look, I've thought about whether or not we should have this lofty goal of increasing the voter turnout. There are a lot of organizations that are focused on that. We've done a workshop with Voice the Vote, which is a partnership between TMU, United Way, and Metamorphosis to do that very thing. I think the value that we can provide as the Board of Trade, as one of the sole, as I say, civil society organizations in Brampton, is to provide the commentary and the opportunities for engagement so that we shape the narrative around this election. And I think there's a lot at stake with this election. So that was sort of the level set that I provided that evening. Is that what you recall?
No, that's exactly right. And there was those two key points that you talked about. The importance of the decision making that happens at this particular tier of government, and the majority of issues that we hear that give people frustration. If they're not the sole purview of municipal and regional government, they're very much touched by municipal and regional government. And so having a strong voice for the community in this, when we're electing those individuals who are going to serve as councillors and mayor, I think is vital. And then to your point, in spite of that, the historically low voter turnout we've seen, and that's a truism across all communities. Municipal level is typically the lowest level, but Brampton was startlingly low at the last municipal election. The one other element I'll put in here, and I don't know if it's among the reasons why voter turnout at the municipal level is low, but to me it heightens the importance of engagement at the municipal level, is that, or heightens the importance of the work of organizations like ours at the municipal election, maybe is the right way to say it, is when you're engaging with a candidate at the provincial or federal level, or when you're deciding who to cast your vote for, maybe is the better way to say it, you don't necessarily have to have the same level of candidate engagement. I think it's important that voters get an opportunity to learn who's going to represent them and understand the nuances of their positions and so forth. No one is ever a black and white candidate. However, you can rely on things like party platforms and election materials to get a general sense of what one stands for and where they may stand on critical issues for you when it comes to a provincial election or a federal election, because the party plays such an important role in communicating what the priorities of the candidates who run under that party's banner are. But at a municipal election, you have none of that. Every one of these candidates represents themselves. And therefore, their positions can be all over the place. And you can't make assumptions about where they may stand. They may appear conservative or progressive in how they conduct themselves, but it doesn't mean that you can read into where they would stand in every position, because they're allowed to make their own choices.
This is a great point. I think, without naming names, I think some of the feedback I've gotten about council is there was a certain perception maybe of certain individuals and where they might stand on certain issues. And then as council went on, the years went on, there was a flip on certain positions. And how about I use an example from Toronto, Brad Bradford. I'm happy to speak to this. Brad Bradford, when he started his time in council, he was pro bike lanes. He was a quote unquote progressive candidate. Now he's running under a decidedly conservative banner, and he's really kind of championed this pro vehicle point of view on council. And so there is the sense of betrayal that some people feel, and I think that's a very real thing. And I think part of that is we don't ask the right questions when they're vying for power. And if we did that, if we really interrogated their beliefs and actually heralded their platforms, then I think it's a lot easier to hold them accountable.
Absolutely. And the only thing I'll challenge in what you said there a little bit is that we don't ask the right questions. I think the way I would characterize it is that the electorate is not given the opportunity to ask questions broadly.
Fair.
I think organizations like ours, who, because we do things like organized debates, because we have public platforms that candidates want to take advantage of, we have the opportunity to ask those questions that I think is difficult for the average individual to necessarily be able to ask themselves. You almost have to rely on that individual coming to your door and being able to hold them to account. And ideally that individual, not just a representative who's at their door knocking on their behalf.
Campaign,
right? So we don't create enough, we don't facilitate enough opportunity for voter engagement with the candidates. And candidates, even if you're the best intentioned of candidates, it's very difficult. You're talking about a lot of doors you got to knock on to have those conversations. So I think it is important that you have organizations, whether they be media organizations or civic institutions, who can collate those questions and present them in a forum that is public.
Yeah.
So and then share those answers, which is
Yeah.
I think the work that we're aspiring to do here.
Yeah, so I asked two questions that evening. The first was, what issues are most important to you?
Yeah.
And we used Slido so folks could log in from their phones and provide their answers. And I think a couple of the topics that came up were not surprising. I think they've been on our radar, but I think some of them were, or some of them probably allowed for a shift in perspective.
Right.
Do you want to share?
So when we cross off the ones that you thought you weren't surprised by, because we've probably already talked about them or will talk about them.
Yeah.
So that's things like affordability and housing, for instance.
Congestion. I think those topics we've been talking about ad nauseum.
Yeah. So what surprised you?
What surprised me is what didn't come up.
Yeah.
Which was immigration.
Yeah.
I think that was very interesting. What the other, I don't know if it was a surprise, but I think what kind of feels slightly outside of our purview, but increasingly part of our advocacy is around public safety.
Yeah.
And this came up a few times.
Yeah. It was the most. So for those who aren't familiar with Slido, an individual, you can pose a question. Those in the room can respond. It's a QR code, it gets you into their little app. But then what you can do is if someone has already responded in the manner that you would have, or you like them, you can upvote.
React. Yeah.
So safety was interesting to me because it not just that it came up, it was the most upvoted of the respondents responses as well. So it was clearly the one that captured the most people's attention.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting topic because I was chatting with Sabine Matheson from Strategy Corps, and Strategy Corps does some work and research around some of these issues and what people mean when they talk about these things. Public safety is one of those ones where, depending on who you ask or your political persuasion, that could mean immigration, that could mean homelessness and addiction. It could mean perceptions of safety, right? Mm-hmm. It could literally mean crime, right? So there are lots of ideas that are trafficked in to this idea of public safety. So it's a big topic. It's actually the topic that at the federal election was kind of the deciding factor for many of the ridings in Brampton itself. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting one. This issue around extortion as well is, I would say, a significant business issue, becoming increasingly significant in our community. And I think that could be folded into this topic as well. So yeah, I think this will be one of the top issues in this municipal election.
And so I absolutely agree. And my curiosity on that, so maybe let's talk about the immigration one for a quick second. That you're surprised it didn't come up. Yeah. Do you think, because I think that's a huge issue in our community. Yeah. Do you believe that was because people recognize that's not a municipal issue? Like, do we have a sophisticated enough group of people there who said that's actually a federal issue, so I'm not going to put it on the list? Or do you think it means something else that immigration didn't come up?
It's interesting because I think part of it could be that we had a particularly literate group of folks who understood what the jurisdictional breakdown was. I think also immigration is also a topic like public safety where it depends what you're talking about.
Yeah.
When we talk to employers and they say immigration is a top concern, it's really around workforce.
Yeah, it's access to people. Yeah,
access to people. When you talk to some other individuals, it might mean, my kid can't get a job at Tim Hortons. Yeah. Right. You talk to some other folks, it could be, I'm just racist. Right. For some other folks, it could be, I'm just, I think there's been a level of complexity that's been a result of immigration, the rooming houses, and you see mattresses now on the side of the road, like. That also is kind of folded into this topic of immigration. Yeah. So it's one of those like big omnibus issues. I wouldn't say it didn't come up. I mean, I think it's sort of embedded in when we talk about affordability and all these other things. But it's I think immigration just feels like it's not a neutral topic.
Oh no, it's a lightning rod issue, and that's why. Like I said, in my mind, it's a key one, particularly because of where you started off. Within a business community, the access to workforce, both being able to hire people, increasingly being able to retain people, despite immigration status, has become something, particularly for our large employers. That is a very passionate topic for them.
For sure.
So that's why I was surprised it wasn't there either. But I ascribed it to This is a room of people who are generally, these are folks, like, let's be clear what the gathering was. It was a town hall that we had after our big summer barbecue on a weeknight. We were probably at 8 o'clock in the evening. So these are people who chose we already fed them. They already had all the fun. The FIFA game was over, and chose to stay and listen to you and I talk about matters of governance and policy. So they knew. This is the people who know. So I suspect it was due to that. Coming back to the safety issue, what is your perception? Because I have a lot of safety conversations with members and businesses in the community, particularly small businesses where individuals both are among our small businesses. That's where you most likely see the individuals who both work and live in the community, and consistently safety and the perception of safety comes up. But almost everyone has some anecdote that they can cite, and it's across the spectrum of what you described. Someone who experienced extortion at their business, that's very much within the South Asian community. Someone who was the victim of some form of petty crime or scam. Someone who's experienced a break-in or has had an encounter with an individual experiencing homelessness that left the wrong taste in their mouth. It's all over the place. But what I'm always struggling with, and I always try to probe the question gently, because I don't want to necessarily spark a debate on. I'm just seeking insight. Is what would you have them do? And I'm curious what your point of view is on it. Not that these aren't questions that can be addressed. What I find is really interesting is that most often this question becomes a question of enforcement. And this kind of plays into, I think, how councils, and we've seen both at the city level and the regional level, because we sat in on regional budget conversations, then it becomes a question of policing budget. This is what it ultimately becomes a conversation around. How do we get more cops on the street, and how do we give them the tools they need to do the job? It seldom is a conversation around the upstream pieces. Why do we have individuals experiencing homelessness?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do we have issues with extortion in our communities and so forth? And I'm curious how you see the safety issue, because I understand it's important. I don't know that we're having the level of discourse that we need to have as a community to actually make a change. And I don't see our political leadership necessarily going there either. So much of the focus becomes one of how much money do we give Peel Regional Police?
Unfortunately, that's what all of these issues get boiled down to, and that's why it's so. I don't want to say problematic, but why it's so challenging that so many issues get folded into this issue of public safety is because the answer becomes police. Right, and then now police have to develop special units to address certain issues. It should have never been the case that our answer to growing homelessness and addiction, mental health challenges is more policing. Right. And there's an inherent flaw in the way that our local government is designed, in the sense that police boards are separated entirely from the council structure. And you have council representatives on the police boards, but those budget line items are determined separate from council deliberation, and then presented to council as, well, we want a 23% increase in the police budget. Take it or leave it. That's sort of the state of play with police budgets.
No, absolutely, and because we look at the response to safety in our community, and I think it's important we use the word safety, because it's not criminality.
No,
criminality is a different conversation. Criminality requires upstream, but it also requires enforcement. But a lot of what we describe as safety is in this nebulous thing as you're describing, that has very little to do with enforcement, has a lot more to do with prevention and what are the norms of our society that we are prepared to accept or not accept, living in modern Brampton. And the challenge I feel that we have is that I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg here, because in as much as the budgets are presented this way, and you're right, it feels as though councillors don't really have the opportunity to comment on it. I also feel for those councillors, because if they were to be the one who said, I'm actually going to push back on the policing budget because I believe we shouldn't be putting money into enforcement, we should actually be spending money on homeless shelters and counselors and social workers and what have you, safe injection sites and that, they'll be pilloried.
Look at Carolyn Parrish, right? She was pilloried. The same day that we had our town hall, the Mayor Patrick Brown put together a press release criticizing Mayor Parrish for her comments around the police budget.
That she was critical of it.
On the radio. So you're absolutely right, and I think there is also a political alliance that one must maintain with PRP in the same way that Toronto has that with the TPS and even Mamdani. People have criticized him for working with police. In this,
and
in
a
way.
very conservative police chief.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I think the real answer to some of these issues around safety is to listen to Metamorphosis and to listen to the calls for increased social service funding. And a part of that is that's a nebulous problem. That's a growing cost center. The region also doesn't have unlimited resources to throw money at that. And so it becomes a provincial advocacy item because now the province needs to step in with additional funding.
Do you think if people were aware, because I always believe like education and insight is where we start the conversation.
Yeah.
Do you believe if more people were aware of how much of their tax dollars as residents of this community and the tax increases we face on an annual basis were driven by the police budget, that people would view policing differently?
Let me put it this way: I don't think I don't think a good job has been done to illustrate those cost centers. I think that I would be motivated by that infographic. I think that would probably change a few minds. For sure.
I feel like it would have to. I think it would at least prompt the question to say, is there a better way?
Yeah.
Because let's be clear here, right? Like we are in a 2-tier municipality. The city of Brampton has done their best to hold the line on increasing taxes. I do believe that's going to change in this coming year or in years to come, because we are stretched to our limits here, and there's real needs in our community that need to be addressed. But because the city has held the line, we still, as residents, as anyone who owns a home here will tell you, our tax bill has gone up year over year, and that's driven by the region.
Yeah.
And that component that drives the region's budget increase year over year is not more wastewater services or public health. It's policing.
It's policing.
And so if you're the kind of person who, and I think anyone who's a homeowner in Brampton would say, who's not happy with your tax bill, a big part of that is the police budget, and the increase on it year over year is the police budget. And we talk about safety being the issue, but if the perception in the community is that safety is declining, and yet our policing budget's going up year over year, I hope at some point we say, hey, there's a disconnect here. Throwing money at the problem is not the issue.
Well, I think that's a very compelling argument. I feel like on one hand, illustrating just how much money is going towards the police, I think would be illustrative for folks. I think on the other hand, healthcare has done a very good job of, or we have done a very good job of illustrating the importance of healthcare and raising money for another hospital.
Yeah.
I think this framing that council has done with the budget this year around a 0% tax increase, notwithstanding a 1% levy for the hospital, I think that's brilliant framing, because that's essentially a 1% increase in property taxes. Yeah. However, I wonder if we were to present the next budget as, it's a whatever percent increase, but there's also a 1% levy for addressing homelessness.
Yeah.
And addressing XYZ, mental health addictions. I would that be compelling? I'm not sure, but
I would think so. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, like I'm sort of torn, because I have, as you've probably picked up on my comments already, like I want to challenge councillors more on this issue, but I also have sympathy for them.
Yes.
Because ultimately they're held accountable by us as residents and voters.
Yeah.
So for us to ask them to be more challenging of the police budget, to push for prevention, to push for alternative dispute resolutions, or whatever the case may be, that allows us to hire different types of individuals than armed police officers with the costs and the overhead that goes along with that to respond to everything. There has to be an electorate that says we want this.
Yes.
Because otherwise, to use the parish example is a great current one, otherwise you are going to be the politician who is going to be the one anti-police. Like, that is not going to fly.
No.
But in order to get there, I think it starts with voters saying, I understand that the solution to this is not just more policing. Yeah. We have to respect that safety, the perception of safety, is a real issue in our community. It's come across and continues to come across. But to say we just spend more money on cops is not going to solve this.
Yeah.
The better I think the community understands that, the more confidence, the more we can ask then of our politicians, and the more confidence hopefully they should have to move in a way, because at the end of the day, they're human beings and they are going to do what's best for their political future as much as for the community. It's the nature of their job. We have to empower them to act with conviction and courage.
Absolutely, I completely agree.
Anyway, so that was an interesting one. The one other topic that did come up, and I was curious what you thought it meant. So we scrolled down the list. It was safety. There was some stuff around understanding budget and how the budget process works. And we've done some work there, and we'll do a lot more talking about that in the months to come, because budget's going to be always a big topic here at the Board of Trade. But one of the affordability you talked about, one of the issues that came up, and just because it was, we didn't have because we did through the slide deck thing, the Slido, we didn't have the opportunity to ask the person who posted what they meant. So I'm just going to throw it to you. What do you think it meant? Someone put the term leadership alignment. And I have an idea of what I think that means, but I'm curious what you think that means when someone says, my concern in the upcoming election is leadership alignment.
Yeah, alignment's an interesting word to use. It could be, is leadership aligned with the electors? I think that could be one interpretation. What comes to mind for me is almost accountability, leadership accountability, right? Like this idea around how does one present themselves as being the right type of leader, and what are sort of the commitments that a leader is making as they serve their electorate. And I think we haven't had a lot of that in Brampton. However, and I keep bringing him up, I think the model of servant leadership that I think is very compelling is in New York currently. I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit in our next topic, but even this idea around like, I'm not going to accept a pay raise because I've knocked on doors and no one's ever told me they want the mayor to be making more money. I think that's very compelling. I think that's very interesting. But what do you think alignment means?
I interpret it as alignment across tiers of government. I like your interpretation. That's an interesting one.
Okay.
I interpret it as meaning, when I hear alignment among leadership, what I heard was, are our various tiers of government all pulling in the same direction as it pertains to our community? Because that's, and again, I might be jaundiced a little bit because of the job, but I see how the various decisions made at various levels have unintended consequences. Sometimes those can be addressed had there been more stakeholder engagement and conversation. We've talked about stuff like that when it pertains to post-secondary and immigration. Like, someone just ask a business what would be good for them before you make legislation. But we do see at times, I think, disconnects between the three levels of government.
Absolutely.
And how priorities are rolled out. What are the highest levels of priority? And the fact, quite frankly, you use the metamorphosis example. I think it's a brilliant one, right? So just a quick recap, if you're new to the podcast here, the Metamorphosis is a network, is a group of non-for-profits and civic institutions that have come together to study basically the effects or the impacts of funding to the region of Peel, and understanding, basically trying to illustrate, benchmark and illustrate how underfunded the region has been, and how to and come forward with recommendations on how to close that funding gap, so that we're more level set with other parts of the province. When we talked about the Metamorphosis report in the context of when we went to the region of Peel for the budget earlier this year, there was unanimity across the various councillors, and you and I presented, and there were councillors from Brampton, Mississauga, Caledon. Every one of them,
everyone agreed,
was in agreement with our point of view around where the advocacy needed to be. Every one of them was in support. We had councillors saying, "Hey, would you be prepared to write some letters and make some noise on this?" And everyone at that table was there. But what came across in the conversation we were having with those councillors was that although we all agreed in the numbers in that report that the Metamorphosis Network put together, that those at the provincial level were in disagreement. They were questioning the numbers. They were challenging the assertion that there was, not mentioning that there was an underfunding, but the degree to what the underfunding would be. And then absolutely on, well, what action needs to or not be taken in order to address that gap. There was no alignment there. To me, when people talk about leadership alignment, that's the kind of stuff I think about is, do our various levels of government all agree on what it is that Brampton actually even needs, so that we even get them to agree on the numbers of and the data that we're looking at to identify where the solutioning can come from. That would be my interpretation.
That's interesting. I mean, ultimately, it is increasingly the case that our municipal leaders are essentially lobbyists for our community. They advocate at senior levels of government because they have so few fiscal resources, but also jurisdictional authority
Yeah.
to address some of these issues. So I think that's a perfectly legitimate inquiry that voters might have.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm curious, and so maybe to wrap up this topic, let's talk a little bit, just really briefly, about this is not the end of us soliciting input on the election priorities, right?
No.
What would you say? I know we're still working through some planned details, but high level, what's coming next?
Yeah. So, I mean, every election we do debates, and so what we'll be doing is we'll be after the nomination period closes, we'll be doing outreach to candidates themselves, and we'll be setting up debates among various council candidates and mayoral candidates. But in the lead up to all of that, we will be producing some content, both written, video, and otherwise, to essentially provide some level set and opportunities for engagement, and you can reach out to either of us to provide specific questions, but also we will be hosting some conversations where you can attend, perhaps some sort of issue forums, town halls. We'll be writing writings, content, and we'll be announcing the specifics of that soon. But essentially, inviting feedback and commentary on some of the issues of the day, and then of course, when we have our debates themselves, we'll be, like we do in other elections, we will be having a panel of our members and community members who will ask direct questions of candidates themselves. So ample opportunity for engagement, and really looking forward to some of the events we have coming up as well. This is sort of the number one in the second question I asked. This was sort of the number one answer, is they want more events.
Yeah.
People want more networking opportunities. They want to meet each other, and so I'll be looking at organizing some very specific focused events, but also some of the more the broader conversations around our economic summit in September, where we do have our city building conversation. How can we incorporate some elements around the election into that event as well?
Yeah, no, that's great, and lots more to come. And what you described there is just the stuff that we're doing on our own. We also have a few collaborations coming together with a few different media partners and other organizations in the community that will be taking part in and making sure that our members and residents also have the opportunity to do exactly what you're describing. Share their points of view and let us help amplify those. So lots of great stuff coming. So one of the other things we want to talk about was, actually it's a nice segue out of where we just were. So accountability, being an issue was one of the things that was raised as well. And holding our elected leaders to account somewhat. We've got an interesting report was released today. The NDP provincially has really been championing and throwing fuel on this fire. Of a report that's come about that a number of local MPPs, and by local not just GTA but specifically Brampton and Mississauga, to Brampton, have been perhaps making too liberal a use out of the opportunity to take care of the snow day budget for taking hotel rooms in Toronto. And in particular, Hardeep Grewal and Charmaine Williams, to the tune of, I think, just over $27,000, just short of $16,000 in hotel stays charged to the province. This is under legislation that was there to support MPPs who are coming in from out of town to attend the legislature in Queen's Park in the event of like a weather event. So if there was like a giant snowfall or a blizzard or something like that, it's understandable that an MPP coming in from London or further afield might have difficulty getting home that night, and there's a budget item there to say you stay in Toronto, stay safe, whatever the case may be. But what we're talking about here is some local MPPs who live very close to the city, who were utilizing that privilege on days that were not weather events, and charging tens of thousands of dollars to stay in. Someone did the math and divided the dollars spent by the number of nights apparently that they were spread over. Some very premium hotel room stays in Toronto. Stan Cho, the Minister of Tourism, was one of these individuals. He was from Willowdale. He under the scrutiny of the public, he repaid the entire $16,000 that was on his line item, and actually stepped down, not as an MPP, but as a minister. There's similar pressures now on Nina Tangri in Mississauga, but Charmaine Williams and Hardeep Grewal here in Brampton to likewise, take some action, show some contrition. And Premier went so far as to say he expects these MPPs to pay back every one of these, all these expenses that were claimed. So interesting. I'd love to hear your take. I don't know if I said too much here, but to leave you enough to say on it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of Hardeep Grewal, he also allegedly took out a advertisement in his father's newspaper.
Yes. So him, you're right. Yeah. So there's a whole other layer. So there's the piece here around the expenses, and then the NDP is actually filing a conflict of interest allegation. I don't know what the official terminology is here, but yes, his father owns the Punjabi Post, and I don't know what the details of the allegation are. I have to imagine there must have been some higher frequency or something that indicates that his father's newspaper was somehow given favorable treatment or gotten a lot more advertising dollars than the typical media source would have gotten. I don't know.
And to be honest, I think ultimately the claim is that he should have declared this conflict of interest and sought advice from the Integrity Commissioner before doing this, knowing that his father does own this paper and this decision could potentially enrich a family member. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed with the representative from Brampton East. I don't know Hardeep particularly well. I mean, we've reached out to him a few times to attend events. What I will say is, I think he doesn't often attend our events, and I think this does not bode well in terms of community stakeholders feeling like you're present in the community. What I would also say is, I think it is unfortunate that for a political party that seems to be so tapped in to the average worker, knowing that there are many thousands of Bramptonians who make that commute to Toronto every day, and they often work late, and they take that GO train back home. There's a GO train, right? And what I would say is, if it's that difficult to get back to Brampton, maybe we should improve two-way all-day GO on the GO train.
Oh, I like that pivot you made there. Yeah, there you go. It's an advocacy item.
There you go.
We thank Ministers Williams and Parliamentary Secretary Grewal for illustrating the need for more higher order transit in Brampton. Thank you for your service.
Yes, absolutely. I think it looks terrible. It looks terrible. And, if Stan Cho resigned from cabinet, I don't know if there's any other pathway for Minister Tangri, Williams, Grewal. Look, I appreciate Stan Cho for repaying that amount. I hope the others repay their amount. I'd be interested as well to know to what extent there are some details around Stan using a mix of donor money and taxpayer money for Blue Jays games and lobster dinners and buttery steaks and things like that. So
buttery steaks.
So I'd be curious if there's any information like that is unearthed. I don't know what to say. Like I mentioned Mamdani saying that he wouldn't take a pay increase because that isn't what taxpayers want, ratepayers want. I think this is another blow to the PC party and their claim to represent the average Ontarian worker. I don't know how they necessarily. I hope that they make amends for this.
Yeah, and likewise, and I think the key issue is the one that you flagged there. Is that disconnect from the constituents that they represent, who are doing that same commute.
Yes,
and don't have the luxury of being able to say, I'm going to stay in a nice hotel in Toronto tonight at the on an expense account, and not worry about having to get back home, and then have to do it all again the next day and the next day, the next day. It's a huge disconnect. The thing I'm curious about. So I guess there's two pieces here. So the ramifications thus far only seem to be with Stan Cho's, but it sounds like other things are coming based on the Premier's comments, but have been as far as these individuals as members of government and in particular Ford's caucus. But there hasn't been a conversation yet, and this is the part I'm curious about. Is there an accountability to their constituency? Stan Cho stepped down. He's not the minus. We can only use him as an example, not to single him out in any adversarial way. He's just the only one who's taken some action thus far. So in the case of Stan Cho, He lost his ministerial spot. He's still the MPP for Willowdale.
Yeah.
And will the people who voted for him, when is their opportunity to feel like they got some justice, closure, whatever on this?
Yeah.
The next provincial election is some years away. And I'm curious, what are the ramifications of a decision like this in terms of accountability at the local level? Because we don't have the opportunity to have a referendum on these individuals for some time. And a lot can happen between now and then. The memory of voters, unfortunately, as we've seen recently, is very short. And I suspect that so long as they go through whatever admonishment or disciplinary action they have to go at the party level, that these MPPs will likely not be scathed by this too much when it comes to 2028.
Well, I think the biggest blow would be if they were removed from caucus.
Yeah.
I think if they were removed from caucus, there's no coming back from that. They will not be elected again in 2028, 29, whatever it is, 28, I think.
28. Yeah.
I think I think John Fraser from the interim leader of the Liberal Party, Ontario Liberal Party, said that if Stan Cho was in his caucus, he would be removed from caucus.
That's right.
So I'm curious to see what the premier does,
Yeah.
and what their move is. But this is a bad look, and I think we deserve better as taxpayers. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And again, I just hope that this is the type of thing that stays with voters.
Yeah.
We are really great at being outraged in the moment. And we're really bad at remembering when we have an opportunity to make a decision.
Totally.
And we saw that at the last provincial election. To me, that was what the Greenbelt piece was all about.
Yeah.
The deals with the LCBO and the Buck of Beer. There was all these things that when they were happening, the fervor about Ford and what his government represented was very loud and very passionate, and then seemingly forgotten the minute we actually had to cast a vote and decide who it is that we wanted to have represent us. So I don't know if this is like a death by a thousand cuts, and maybe at some point this all catches up. But my fear is that these individuals get away with it. And it's not because I think these individuals themselves need to be punished. This is not me being punitive to them as people. We just deserve better from government in general. And regardless of their party or what have you, if they get away with it, then all it does is prove to the next person that they can get away with it.
Yeah.
If there's so the line has the discipline needs to be significant, I think, to demonstrate not just for this Ford government, but whomever's government it is next, that this level of disdain for the voter will not be tolerated. And one of the ways that has to happen is not just the party leader taking action, but I think the voters taking action, saying we will not accept these individuals back.
Totally.
And that has nothing to do with, again, these folks as people. I think that message needs to be sent because we deserve accountability from our elected leaders at a time that every level of government is preaching austerity. For them to spend money like this and then not have a ramification would be unconscionable in my mind.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to really say.
No,
about that.
I don't know what else there is to say. I think it's an accountability issue. I hope it stays.
Yeah.
And I think it's just one of those things we just note down somewhere and remember when the time comes that we have to remind people that this happened, right?
Not rooting for one particular party over another, but this is really, the ball is in the NDP and the Liberals' court.
Yeah.
And whoever becomes the next leader of the Liberal Party, you got to remind the electorate about these issues. You got to bring it back to the public consciousness, because these are egregious transgressions.
Yeah.
Any one of these. That's another thing I've been thinking about is the Ford government feels like it's operating like it's the Trump government, in the sense that Trump knows he cannot run for president again.
Sure.
It almost feels like this is the last hurrah for this particular government. And it feels like every week there is something that should be a leadership referendum. Yeah. But
and I fully agree. And I think we may even have said as much on the podcast. Like it feels like whether it's the spa, the casinos, the whatever, it just feels like he's looking for legacy projects and things he can put his name on. Yeah. Because the bill is going to come due. Yes. But by the time the bill comes due, he's going to be, in Florida somewhere, retired and enjoying the spoils of his political career. Yeah. By the time the rest of us actually catch up and have to, understand the ramifications of all the decisions that are being made right now.
Totally.
But there's a lot of stuff that's happening in this government. I agree. It feels like there's this piece around the ego. You wonder if he'll want to come back, because if he does get elected again with a majority in 2028, that would be historic.
Yeah.
And maybe there's an appeal there to him doing so. This is way early to be speculating on these things.
Yeah.
But he definitely is conducting himself like a guy's like, yeah, this is my last couple of years at it. May as well have some fun. Enrich my friends as best I can, and let's do a couple things that I can cut some ribbons, have my names on some buildings, and I'm out of here. That's what it feels like.
It feels like he's selling the furniture, so to speak.
Well, you already said the 5-letter word, so so that leads us right into tariffs and what's been going on. So we're recording this on, I don't even know what date it is, the 22nd. Yeah. So I think it's been 2 days now. The Trump administration has announced a set of tariffs that is, I think, at the most generous way to describe it would be puzzling.
Yeah.
Because there's no rhyme or reason I can see as to why we're tariffing essential oils and fake beards, but also hockey sticks, but we're I don't understand what the list of where this came from.
Yeah.
But what's your take? I have a take, but I'm curious what your take is.
50% tariff on what would otherwise be protected through CUSMA, apparently as a retaliation against the interprovincial, or I say provincial, restrictions on alcohol sales and that sort of thing. As a response to this, Canada, I guess, is boycotting the celebration of the Gordie Howe Bridge because the climate isn't quite right. Mark Carney has said that this is a violation of law, of CUSMA, and premiers have said, look, we're very open to negotiating here and figuring something out. But yeah, it seems like this is just the latest example of Trump being an agent of chaos. And I think increasingly, I am interpreting Trump as someone who doesn't want you to figure him out. And the moment you think, there is some level
prevailing logic,
or stability, he's changing it up.
Yeah.
Now Zelensky is his best friend all of a sudden. But just was it last year, he was being reviled in the White House.
No.
Europe is a friend or foe depending on the day. Canada, same thing, right? It seems like, and even internally, right? The moment that people assume JD Vance is the heir to his
he cuts him out at the knees.
Exactly. And now Marco Rubio is joining him at FIFA and all these things, right? So it becomes it's this game of we don't know what his next move is going to be, and I think this is just the latest example of that. I'm just kind of like, I don't even know what to do about this issue, because this is just this uncertainty is just the state of the world now.
Yeah.
And what's your take? I don't know.
I guess I'm not sure. So I don't disagree with anything you're saying.
Yeah.
I think for me, this just feels like, it's the latest. I think you're right. Like, how can I upset the equilibrium? Because when things are chaotic, there may be some advantage to me. Mm-hmm. I do think this is very much a negotiation tactic.
Yeah.
To be clear, these tariffs are not in effect.
Yeah.
These tariffs have been announced, but there's 30 days from the announcement, so still another 4 weeks essentially before they take effect. I think this is an effort to put some pressure on negotiators to come to the table and address some of the issues that he really does care about, things like supply management and some of these other issues that I think are actually, there's some passion and some energy on the U.S. side to see more favorable outcomes for them. So let's just create more pressure on the Canadian government in the interim.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past it being really weird, petty stuff. Like, a lot was made of the fact that, a number of the players on Sunday, gave the most passing or even avoided shaking hands with Donald Trump. And a lot of love was shown to Mark Carney when they were coming to collect their medals at the FIFA final. And is he just mad that the Prime Minister of Canada is more liked than he is? I wouldn't put any of this, to have that happen the next day he announces tariffs out of nowhere. I can't help but link these things. Yes. So in my mind, there's no rhyme or reason. The best I can think of is it's just, let's create more pressure.
Yes.
And just turn up the dial another notch. Because there is no real, like I said, there's no, the reality is it sounds like a lot. It's a 50% tariff. One of the statistics I found was interesting is if you total up all the items that are under this new batch of tariffs, it represents less than 5% of our overall trade with the US.
That's right. Yeah.
So it could be very detrimental to some specific businesses for whom that particular item, if you're a hockey stick manufacturer, if you're Bauer, I guess, that could be, really detrimental to a hockey stick manufacturer who sells, primarily the US. But across the broader Canadian economic landscape, this is a blip. This is not going to affect the cost of living or have any real detrimental effect to you or I. So I think this is a lot more about the optics and the noise than anything. The part that I thought was interesting was, for me, just how much of, and obviously the algorithm feeds, which we show interest in. So I'm guilty of contributing to this in some form, but I thought it was interesting that my news feed was filled yesterday with the tariffs and Trump announcing this and government's going to say that and Mark Carney's not ruling out reciprocals and yada, 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 yada. And you would have, if all you did was look at my news feed, you would have thought it was Armageddon.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, this is the only thing that matters in the world. But when we take a step back, if I think about it, like we said, the overall trade impact is almost negligible to most of us. And I don't know anyone who's thought, like, we didn't come into the office today and have a conversation like, oh, a bunch of members called me and they're upset about tariffs.
No,
or
no.
I haven't heard from anyone who's actually got an issue with this. I think it's interesting that how this is being presented feels very disconnected to me from how people feel about it. And this was similar to, I think, an observation I shared with you on our last conversation when we had our tariff task force meeting among local businesses. And the provocation was put out there, how was the response? How are people dealing with tariffs? A couple of key industries, once again, steel and aluminum, because they are specifically targeted. Almost everyone else in the room didn't want to talk about tariffs. They want to talk about workforce. They want to talk about affordability. They want to talk about access to power, the stuff that we'll be talking about at our infrastructure summit and upcoming events. I think the tariff conversation is kind of done.
Yeah, and I think that's wise. I also have been asked quite a bit about my position and advocacy on tariffs, and I sort of refuse to talk about it just because I kind of think this is the whole point.
Yeah.
To your point, Trump knows that when he makes an announcement like this, media will go into a frenzy.
Yeah.
And he is applying reality TV logic to politics. He's making it a reality television show. And he is a merchant of attention. And he wants all the attention. And part of it is ego driven, but also a lot of it is to sort of inoculate himself from having to be answerable to the things that actually matter. So the tariff thing is actually, it's a great tool because it stirs up a lot of anxiety. It gets a lot of clicks and a lot of media attention, but he doesn't have to commit to anything. It's in 30 days, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot can happen in 30 days, right? So I think if you look at the White House social media, like it's just memes, right? Like they did a UFC event on the White House lawn. Like everything is just theatrical, and if we give this more oxygen, then it just he'll just continue to do it.
Yeah, you're just giving him exactly what he wants. Yeah. The best thing is almost it's like a child having a tantrum.
Exactly.
As long as no one's getting hurt, we're just going to step back and just kind of let it play out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of Mark Carney's position. Is he seemed very chill when he was asked about this in Ottawa. I mean, I think he's just like, I don't know. I'm just kind of done with it too.
Yeah. I know. I think it's worth asking because of the nature of what our organization is and who we represent.
For sure.
But I appreciate us talking about this, and if someone's listening to this has a counterpoint of view, let us know.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like until something happens, I don't know that there's any value in talking about tariffs anymore.
Exactly.
I did use our platforms today to do a reminder to our membership that we do have platforms like Built in Brampton and others. If you want to promote a more support Canadian business approach, that's great. But beyond that, like I don't know really what action anyone can take. It's sort of outside of our control, and I think again I don't even think it's meaningful anymore. I will say one thing on the trade, which I failed to add onto the agenda, but I think it's great to hear, is that there was announced yesterday. Premier Ford announced that some interprovincial trade movement has finally happened.
Yep.
And there's some bilateral movement. I think it was primarily around alcohol sales, if I recall.
That's right.
But Alberta, BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and I don't believe any of the Maritimes. Quebec, I think, was in it. But great to see, because this is something that we've been saying, and I actually wrote a blog about it a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
That we need to stop talking about the U.S. and start talking about things we have control over. Yeah. It was fantastic to see an announcement yesterday indicating that at last we have some movement on interprovincial trade.
This is the last piece I was going to bring up as well. Is that's the silver lining, and I think the conversation around what we could be doing domestically shouldn't stop. I think this should continue to be the case. What I'd like to see next is a food strategy and a cost of living strategy with some of these fixed costs that businesses have to contend with, there are a number of small businesses that I've spoken to in the food business, and they explain that the cost of lettuce is just great. Like it could be affordable one day, it could be like $14 a box, and then 70 or 80 the next day. It's like there's no logic to it, and there's so much variation. That and they can't increase their prices in that same way. So I think having a consistent source of food, I think, would be a huge. It should be a huge policy priority.
I agree, and if you're looking at that with the other piece, I'm keeping it more. Maybe my ambitions are more modest, but in the context of the interprovincial stuff, I think it's also around credentialing.
Yes,
just more portability and movement. Within our workforce,
100%
would go a long way as well.
100%.
And to me, if you're now going to start opening up the bilateral trade between provinces, the next thing is let's standardize credentialing in some key industries like healthcare, like engineering, and others, and allow for us to have more portability in the workforce.
Completely agree.
But that's a good sign. Like that to me was a positive thing to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So we usually like to wrap up with some kind of media or something that's got your attention. What have you been watching and doing in 2 minutes or less?
Yeah. I've avoided watching The Odyssey just because I want to watch in 70mm IMAX. But what I will say is I think it has unearthed a really interesting debate around the ways in which Homer combined ideas from different cultures, and the way in which Christopher Nolan is doing the same thing by incorporating American accents and
multicultural
casting, all of that. What I will say too is, at the same time, the Avengers Doomsday trailer dropped yesterday.
I have not watched it. I'm avoiding it. Please do not spoil anything. I might cry.
I will not spoil it.
I avoid all Marvel trailers.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And it's just what I will say, without spoiling it, is the juxtaposition of one filmmaker who is insistent on practicality, and then
the CGI fest,
but also the cameo fest,
right?
And
that's why I'm avoiding the trailer. Yes. I don't want the cameo spoiled.
Yeah. So I think you'll actually love it.
I know I'm going to love it. That's why I want to save it for the big theater so I can scream when it happens.
Yes, I did get my tickets for Spider-Man. So
excellent. Mine likewise was The Odyssey. I have seen it.
Yeah.
So we did go and we saw, as I shared with you, the 70mm IMAX version of it. And I can say unequivocally, like, it is absolutely worth seeing in that format. Yes. The visual, I think, is what a lot of IMAX gets sold on, but the sound is something to behold.
The Cyclops scream, was that like the loudest thing you ever heard in your life?
It was, I mean, honestly, the Oppenheimer bomb, I think, is still the biggest, where I actually like physically felt it. But there were a couple pieces within there. But you're right, like there's these standalone moments. But what was remarkable was the Göransson score, and how visceral it was in moments of again, I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything. In moments of high tension and action, that score, because I don't think I'm spoiling it, I think this is common knowledge. He only used instruments that were available at that time, so there's no strings or anything of that nature. So it's a lot of percussion. And it was incredible. How powerful that score made the scenes themselves and building to the action and the climax and all that. It was fantastic. But I will say this, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything here. What's remarkable about that, there's a whole bunch of things, and I would love to talk about it with anyone who wants to talk about it. I have lots of thoughts, but I can't have them without spoiling stuff. But what I can say is what Nolan did there to take a story that is known, like obviously it's a very old poem, and everyone knows the story, or if you at least came up in a Western schooling system, have some familiarity with what the Odyssey is, or Western pop culture, you know what the Odyssey is. The way in which they edited that film and structured the film to give it a fresh take on some of the characters and their motivations was remarkable. And without deviating from, in my mind, what the story is about. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to reimagine Odysseus here as something completely different, and we're going to make him a different kind of character, or we're going to make Penelope a different kind of character. Everything is faithful to the original story, but it's told in a way that gives you a perspective and allows you to see a relevancy to today that I don't know that would have been gotten had you seen a more conventional telling of the story. And there's something, again, I'm trying not to spoil it, so I feel like I'm speaking cryptically, but it is remarkable to behold.
That's amazing. We'll see it this week.
Make the time.
Yeah.
It is absolutely worth it, and I'd love to talk to you about it afterward.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
So with that, thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you on the next one in just a couple weeks. But thanks for listening in.
Yeah.
All right.
care.
Talk to you soon.